The San Jose Buddhist Church Beijing, as Jodo Shinshu Buddhist, stands with Black Lives Matter.
We rise to join the voices of condemning the unjustified deaths of the known. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Rashad Brooks, the unknown and the forgotten.
We are mindful of the lives lost, past and present, in order to prevent future tragedies.
We commit to work toward eliminating all forms of systemic racial injustice locally, nationally, and globally.
We work with the deep hope that together we can become a compassionate community that values the life we share
and the humanity of each individual.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
I wanted to just introduce a little bit of who we are and what we're doing. One of San Jose Nikkei Resistors' goals is to unite, organize, and mobilize the local San Jose Nikkei community to fight for justice and to defend civil liberties. We work with the co-sponsoring organizations to give a voice to the San Jose Japanese American community and to encourage action in opposition to the attacks on immigrants and other injustices. And we've noticed in recent years an uptick in new people in our community like you stepping forward to get involved, and we're not surprised. And we welcome all of your contributions and growing leadership. Many of you here have been active in social justice activism for decades, and I know many of you from the work we did in the movement for redress and reparations for the World War II mass exclusion and incarceration, both in San Jose and other cities where NCRR chapters work. And I want to thank you for coming today, and I respect your enduring commitment.
So just a little bit of context about this particular forum today. So our forum, as you know, is called Nikkei for Black Lives. And our hope is that we are working to end white supremacy. So originally this forum was going to focus on how our community could combat the rise of anti-Asian attacks and scapegoating during the pandemic. But the current situation that began with the murder of George Floyd, followed by national protests, including here in San Jose, which have continued for several weeks, this is a historic moment. And we, with the support of these sponsoring organizations that you see in front of you, decided that we should switch focus. We see this current moment of public contest, resistance, and popular mobilization against anti-Blackness and white supremacy as an urgent movement to which we all belong. So while our attention for this forum shifted to create an intentional space to build solidarity around work for Black lives, we see this as part of a broader movement toward the dismantling of white supremacy, which has everything to do with anti-Asian racism and violence. So this is to say that this moment requires that we come together in solidarity and with strategy to find our way to justice. On a personal note, I just want to say that I am deeply moved by what I am witnessing. I know that all the people who are in the streets protesting, in homes, talking to family and friends, at work, coming together through difficult dialogue, all of you who are taking time on a Sunday afternoon to look at a screen, again, are doing so from a place of love and deep commitment to humanity. It is time for us. As a Yonsei granddaughter of Japanese American incarcerees and the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, I know that we the people together, are our only hope in combating threats to our freedom. So it is that our acts of resistance must be done. So it is that our acts of resistance must be done in solidarity with one another. This stance of solidarity is the principle through which the San Jose Nikkei Resistors, a grassroots Japanese American organization, operates, and why it is that we felt it necessary to put out a statement on Black Lives Matter. Alice Hikito will read this to us now. So Alice Hikito is a member of the San Jose Nikkei Resistors. She joined the San Jose Nikkei Resistors because, in her words, I felt it was especially important for those of us who experienced the internment to not stay silent when we see injustice in our society. We have that lesson to share. So Alice will read the San Jose Nikkei Resistors Statement on Black Lives Matter, which we published in writing on June 4th.
San Jose Nikkei Resistors unequivocally supports the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests against police brutality that have risen up across the country. We echo the call for justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, and every Black person who has been killed by the police, recorded or not. We remember Eric Gardner, a Black man killed by NYPD in 2014. We remember Melvin Truce, a 17-year-old Black high school student murdered by San Jose police in 1985. And we remember Philip Watkins, a 23-year-old Black man killed by San Jose police in 2015. All Black people deserve to live free of police terror. Modern policing in the US evolved from the organized patrol of enslaved Black people. Today we rise up in protest against the continued abuse of power by police against the Black community. Unsurprisingly, police forces across the country have responded to the protests with violence. Here in San Jose, police answered peaceful protests with tear gas, rubber bullets, flashbangs, and batons. SJPD has a history of brutality against Black and other people of color. We remember Antonio Guzman Lopez, Anthony Nunez, Jacob Dominguez, Jennifer Vasquez, and other local Black and brown people killed by the police. San Jose Resistors specifically condemns Tho Tao of Minneapolis PD, whose complicity killed George Floyd, and Jared Ewan of San Jose Police Department, who incited violence against protesters on May 29th. Anti-Blackness is deadly. We call on Asian Americans to support Black Americans in the struggle against white supremacy, a struggle that we share. We call on Japanese Americans and others to join our organization's efforts to support HR 40 as the first step towards Black reparations. The San Jose Nikkei Resistors stand in solidarity with the Black community. And now I'd like to turn this over to Richard Konda, the Executive Director of the Asian Law Alliance, who will introduce our main speaker.
Thank you so much, Alice. I have marched in rallies with Reverend Jeff Moore, stood shoulder to shoulder with him at protests and press conferences, been on panel discussions with him. This is my first opportunity to introduce him. Reverend Jeff Moore is the current president of the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP. He is a tireless advocate in our community, defending the civil rights of all, defending immigrant rights, defending the rights of those who are unhoused, defending the voting rights of people of color. Reverend Jeff Moore worked with many in the community to stop tasers from being used in our jails and used by the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. He led the fight against the plan to have pepper spray used against our youth in juvenile hall. Reverend Moore joined with the Asian Law Alliance to protect the voting rights of Asian Americans in the city of Santa Clara and helped us defeat Measure A in 2018 and Measure C in 2020. Jeff is a founding member of the Black Kitchen Cabinet, and the Black Kitchen Cabinet recently issued a strong statement against anti-Asian racism, and we thank you for that very much, Jeff. These are only a few examples of Reverend Moore's dedication to the principles of equality and justice for all. We are fortunate that Reverend Moore will be our featured speaker today. Reverend Moore.
I just want to thank you, Richard, for that lovely introduction. Some of that stuff I don't even keep records of. I didn't remember, but you brought to remember. Thank you, brother, and I love you for that. And have the utmost respect. And for, I believe it was Erica who started off today. I feel you, begin to wipe my eyes with you, because what you said is so true. And until we all start having that feeling of threat and hurt and harm happening to us, it's the only way we're going to change this current situation. It's one of the ways. And I thank you guys for supporting and trying to bring to the forefront HR 40, because African-American Black people have been here since the start of this nation. We're not credited for the work we did in the Revolutionary War. We're not credited for the work in any of the wars of America that helped set America free, or let alone slavery, and never getting made whole in this country. And until today, those same police departments still practicing some of those same slaveholder tactics. As we know that when the Confederacy lost, many of the Confederate soldiers went to become sheriffs and police of local municipalities. So it continues. But I wanted to tell everyone, a child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down till it feels the warmth, is an African proverb. And what we see today is, I'm so proud of these young people. And yesterday I told them, you've done more in a month and a half than I've done in 10 years. We see Confederate emblems coming down and statues coming down and people talking about making a change, and a community of people coming out to support Black people, African Americans. The recent killings of George and Brianna and Tony and Sean and Aubrey and others prompted hundreds and thousands of people to take action together. Generations of injustice are coming to bear on the streets today. They are our streets. Out of this pain, we're also seeing a new and unsettling force rising up to disrupt the system that is killing our people, smothering our communities, and disregarding our basic needs during a global pandemic. Our recent national survey said that 75% of people feel that we got 46-1, or Agent Orange, is the single greatest threat to the African-American Black community or to the democracy of this America that we have. This feeling was only amplified when he sat there and said that when they start looting, we start shooting. What is happening to America? Our communities are angry and saddened, but we must be strategic and measured as we battle this latest grave injustice. NAACP will not rest until we see these officers charged and convicted of murder of George Floyd. We must keep up our focus on redressing the systemic racism against our community that led to this tragedy. We cannot afford to do so while losing more Black and sons and daughters. We must protest peacefully, demand persistently, and fight politically. Most of all, we must vote in November. To ensure our survival as a free Black people of this country, two things need to happen. First, what has now become clear to the world is the ongoing practice of police brutality, specifically against the Black community. It's not only a civil rights issue, but also a human rights issue. The NAACP on the national level is calling on the United Nations to step up and classify mistreatment of Black people in the United States by the police as a human rights violation. Aggressively call out the U.S. government in the process and impose sanctions if necessary. Secondly, we need sweeping police reform. Federal legislation mandating a zero-tolerance approach and penalizing and or prosecuting police officers who killed unarmed, nonviolent, non-resistant individuals in an arrest. This federal legislation must include the following principles: a ban on the use of knee holds and chokeholds as an acceptable practice for any police officer. The use of force continuum for any police department in this country must ensure that there are at least 6 levels of steps with clear rules of escalation. Each state Opens Records Act must ensure officer misconduct information and disciplinary histories are not shielded from the public. Recertification credentials may be denied for police officers if they're determined that their use of deadly force was unwarranted by federal guidelines. Implementation of a citizens review board in municipalities to hold police departments accountable and build confidence for the community. Now, as part of the San Jose part, and mine is a little bit more stringent, I think, or hopefully we can help you guys help us get there. And we are calling for Santa Clara County to develop and implement an efficient and effective process to decertify law officers that violate the law or fail to meet public standards for law enforcement professionals. For Santa Clara County to report decertified officers to the National Decertification Index to ensure the effects of decertification across state lines. Meaning when an officer loses part of his credentials as a police, he can no longer practice policing here in San Jose, but he can now take a lateral someplace else and go get a job and be somebody else's problem. The firing, as you mentioned, of San Jose police officer, Jarrett, for not de-escalation, but only escalating the problems. Demilitarizing the police, and I think I sent you this one, Richard. We're just working on this one, and I'm getting the paperwork back, and I want you to hear me. 1% of San Jose Police Department's annual share of the general fund, we can send 1,200 students to the city's 3 universities and colleges, 400 students to San Jose State University, 400 students to Evergreen Valley College, and 400 students to San Jose City College for free every year, just using 1% of this police budget as it currently sits from the general fund. That would even assume administrative costs, stipends in excess of tuition fees, and regular tuition increases. This fund, as proposed, will remain sustainable, $1.5 million over budget by 2029 through 30. Next, we want to support the ethics rules change request to reduce conflicts of interest for prosecutors. This was brought forth by George Gascon, former San Francisco District Attorney, that prosecutors are in a unique position, having to work closely with law enforcement officers and evaluate whether some of these officers. So what we want to do is take away the ability for police unions to donate or to sponsor or to support a prosecutor in office. That way, it frees the prosecutor up and to be free to press charges against an officer if he behaves or acts unbecomingly, and he's not subject to worrying about the funding or support from that union. Next, all Santa Clara County law enforcement agency must have citizens review board. The paper I will have out on that, hopefully I'll have it by Tuesday, as they have. I told people earlier I'm not the best writer, so they take mine and they're going to redo that one altogether. I have a retired police officer I'm working with named Richard, so that they can meet their standards and training, so that they can't call it the question that do not have that practical experience. Next, the Santa Clara County police officers departments must be transparent and honest about incidents of use of force and produce weekly reports to the County Board of Supervisors, so we can know what happens. Los Gatos, let's say as an example, is quiet all the time, but something's happening up there. You know, it's something. We just want to know what's going on, right? And Santa Clara County also must end any participation in the 1033 program, federal program, and end all programs that provide military training for local and state police. The 1033 program is where they get the use of military hardware, military equipment, and firearms to bring into our community. So if we can end Santa Clara's participation in that, that'd be great. Lastly, that's it. And I just really wanted to open up for questions. I am so moved. I wanted to get those things out there to begin a discussion about, and I know that's a lot. So these are the efforts that, as we take back control or we reset, we can never go back to normal. Never again must I experience what I experienced when trying to stand there and asking kids to kneel in peace and have police officers come to us and want to push us and knock us down, or randomly spraying the crowd with rubber bullets or shooting tear gas into their own communities. We are their people. They are supposed to be our officers and not an occupying force in our community. We are not a totalitarian society. And so we, as together, to work together to help change this, must come together to reclaim our city and our county and our nation.
I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I think that we want to be on the outside with you, helping you bang on the machine. I mean, I think I speak for everybody here that your talk has been so not only informative, but I feel so moved and by the unity and the care that you show for all the people, and that civil rights are human rights. And I think when you talk about not being recognized, I think a lot of people of color have that feeling too. And I think that you speak for many of us when you talk about you know, how the system is just inhumane and just so anyway, thank you very much. And I know that, you know, many people in the Japanese American community, we want to do something, and we've always wanted to do something, many of us. In our organization, the San Jose Nikkei Resistors, we felt that something concrete that we could do was to organize Japanese Americans in support of HR 40, which, for people who aren't familiar, it's called the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. So last year, we started organizing community discussions on this bill, and also to reflect about our own redress struggle. And the result of this was that our co-sponsoring organizations for this forum, we signed onto a joint resolution last year supporting this legislation, which proposes to create a commission which is similar to the commission that investigated our reparations claim in the 1980s. And we hope other organizations will do the same. We're continuing to do that. So I wanted to just say that HR 40 is not just a regular bill for civic reform or things that we might want to support. I wanted to tell people that, you know, I think we understand that, you know, the struggle of African Americans for equality since the beginning of this nation has been one of the greatest inspirations for all of us, and that Black people have fought without giving up to make the Constitution and the Bill of Rights actually mean something, even if the system of white supremacy left them out. And I think that I want to remind everybody here that a good example of this is that Black Americans were the earliest and staunchest supporters of Japanese American redress efforts. So many of us, especially those of us in the NCRR, National Coalition for Redress Reparations, felt strongly that our fight for redress was one for equality and against exclusion. And not all Japanese American organizations felt this way, but the NCRR pledged to support the efforts of others, such as Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, Black people, Chicanos, and others struggling for reparations and justice. So if we remember that our fight for redress and reparations for the World War II forced removal and incarceration was a fight for equality and justice and against second-class citizenship, then we must do something today to join the fight against white supremacy, because our redress victory, while significant politically and personally meaningful for us, did not establish justice and equality for everybody. So that fight is still brewing, and we owe it to ourselves, to our generations yet to be born, and to all the people of this country to find out what's going on and to get involved.